Morning, Shaz here again from the summer garden. A few changes since we were here last, but I also wanted to talk to you. Did you know that the Solanaceae species, the tomatoes, capsicums and eggplant, are actually not fertilised by the European bee, they're fertilised by native bees. So you can see the tiny flowers of the capsicum plant are so small, and the same with the little flowers of the eggplant as well. So this one's just been pollinated. That they're way too small for the European bees to get into. So our beautiful tiny little native bees have a big job to do, not just in home gardens but in the whole industry. So you can see the pumpkin flower here, how big that is and how open that is too compared to the Solanaceae species. And with pumpkins, the males always flower first, so they have quite a long flower stalk, you can see there. As opposed to a female, which is around the corner. And so this little butternut pumpkin flower has just died back. But even when the flower is younger, you can still see the shape of the fruit under the flower. Luckily, even though most of the summer has passed, the little native bees are still around, so they can produce these amazing fruits by pollinating these tiny little flowers. So a few years ago, I was able to get a grant and run a project working for the local land care group. Hi guys. And I called the project Pollinators of Plenty. So we had a series of facilitators that came and did workshops that were specialists in their area, and we kicked it off with Tracy Lansdale. How you going? And Tracy is a local native bee enthusiast and specialist, and her workshops are just incredible. She's so passionate about native bees and spreading knowledge. So here's Tracy. And native bees are just amazing little creatures. They normally go dormant this time of the year, so they're active during the summertime. And it's really important to leave little areas of refuge in our garden or build a native bee hotel. And there's a beautiful photo here that Tracy took of marigolds, and because marigolds are open and closed with the sun, so they're kind of like a little a bee bed. So yeah, they kept the bees warm during night time, which is just gorgeous. So yes, Pollinators of Plenty was a wonderful way of increasing people's knowledge locally. As an Indigenous friend of mine, Michelle Hutchins, how you going, says that it's a way of helping people and informing people to be custodians of their own dwelling space, because no matter how big our area is, we share the space with so many other little creatures. So it's important, to be aware of that, and if possible to include spaces in our gardens. So getting back to the summer garden in the asparagus bed, I was able to get some late seedlings, which is awesome. So this is a purple basil from Mum. And the tomatoes are still bearing little tomatoes, which is fantastic. A little bit of tomato wilt, but other than that, they're pretty good. And you've seen the capsicums and the tomatoes and the eggplant. So amazing to have late summer vegetables there. The haricot beans are unreal. They've reached the top of the stake now. I've held off harvesting the beans because I want to harvest the seed, so I'm letting the seed pods go yellow so I can harvest. And you can see some of the little white flowers there. Very different to the scarlet runner bean. And if you're saving seed, it's as well to not have any of the other same species around you that's flowering at the same time, so they don't cross-pollinate. A few other interesting things about the summer garden. I've been working on the soil for 10 years now, because between our carving paddock, it grew plantation blue gums for 10 years. So they say every year you have blue gums, allow a year to replace the soil nutrient, because they're so quick growing, they take a lot out of it. But you can see earlier where there were sunflowers flowering, well, in the meantime they've seeded down. The birds have eaten some of the seed, scattered some of the seed, and this little fella is about 1/2 metre high already. I reckon it'll flower before the frost, hopefully. So that's something that's never happened in the garden before, is to have 2 rotations or a follow-on crop of sunflowers. And also, this is a self-seeded kale, and I have just a range of greens every year round in the garden. So any time that I'm cooking a soup or a stew, I just do a harvest around the garden and just put a bit of everything in. So have a lot of nutrients that way. Another one that I'm saving the seed of is from this beautiful blue corn plant, which is the same height as me at the moment. Only a couple seeds germinated this year, so I'll plant more in this year, next year, but you can see some of the cobs are already forming up there, and behind it you can see the leaves from the zucchini plant, which is, you know, starting to rust off with the change in the weather pattern. But I'm leaving them growing because they're actually still producing zucchinis, and zucchini is such an amazing veg to grow. You can use the flowers. I think I talked about that before as well. You can see some of the zucchini still on the plant there. There's an amazing recipe for zucchini slice that I'll do later. So this is a kind of help, please. If anyone's got any treatment for Portuguese millipedes, I would love to hear your thoughts. Not even chooks like them. They're just a horrible thing. They eat organic matter. So when they build up to plague levels, they naturally change. And you can see these ones are cold, so they've just come to life in my hand with the warmth in the sun. Yucky, horrible things I do not like. They eat so much stuff, including the big zucchini. But on the plus side, the zucchini is still producing, the pumpkins are still producing, even though it's near the end of the season and you can see some of the leaves are wilted off. But the little pumpkins are still growing. Yes, they were planted too late. That's okay. I'm still getting some fruit off them. Sometimes you just have to go with it when life gets in the way. The other thing that's interesting is that some of the seed heads from the artichoke from last year have seeded down. So these little guys I will jig up and separate and put them in a different location. And speaking of artichokes, they're back. So when I said that they come up again, with the rain, these guys have started shooting. So I've left the old stalk beside them, nipped it off a little bit, and you can see there they're already about 1/2 metre tall, which is unreal. So before too long they'll be producing those beautiful flowers again. I did plant some other corn, just the super sweet variety, but unfortunately the kangaroos got in and nipped it down, so everything's a little bit weird, a little bit late all over the place, but that's alright, we just go with it. You can also see the scarlet runner bean here, that's the same height as I am. Some of the rabbits got in and nipped everything off at the base, so the poor plant got a bit stressed, and I think a fox took care of the of the rabbits, but in the meantime I didn't end up with many scarlet runner beans, probably just as well, because the haricot bean is the one that I need for seed, so therefore they don't cross-pollinate. So being the change in the seasons, you can see the silver beets come back. That's a fantastic one to have in your garden. Great source of iron. Got to cook it for the iron to release, but there's so many ways that you can use silver beet in your gardens. And also the sweet potatoes. I've got to put up a little post of the story about those. So they're actually flourishing, and hopefully there's some sweet potato underneath. But also you can nip off the leaves and pop them in your pot as well. So there's a lot of vitamins and goodness in those. Speaking about things you can pop in the pot, even pumpkin leaves, which I didn't know until I was watching Gardening Australia a little while. So you can eat the leaves from pumpkins. Fig leaves is also another edible I didn't know about. Dahlia bulbs as well. So dahlia is a great pollinator, but also an edible. And being in the change of the seasons, the broad beans have started to come up. I haven't planted them yet, so these are just a little seedling. But a few years ago, when I first started the veggie garden here, seedlings wouldn't germinate because the ground was still quite acidic from the blue gums. So although the ground grew a lot of sorrel, seedlings didn't come up on their own. So that's a wonderful sign that the soil has regenerated. And it's been a long process of just keeping it going. But did you also know grasses and shrubs is a way that the soil helps regulate its own pH? So that's another reason that I try not to weed. I just nip things off when they get a little bit big and just keep the soil regulated that way. But obviously too, with planting edible plants in the garden, that does, because they are producing ground cover, that does keep your weeds down that way as well. So just in that little space, there's quite a lot going on. You can see the butternuts are still producing. Lovely little fella. Just wonderful to have so much for the pot. And you can keep prices at a minimum that way. I think I said before that when we grew up on the farm, most of what we had was homegrown. And of course, when you are homegrown, you can eat from the seasons. So unfortunately, with fridges, freezers, we've come to demand that we have beans out of season and sweet corn in the wintertime. I mean, that wasn't how it was in the old days. We used to have common sense back then, and I think ego's taken over a bit. But things that we can do, even having herbs around your dwelling space, or even in pots on the windowsills. So this is a beautiful basil that Mum gave me. Yes, it's the summertime. It will die back with the frost, but I've got some frost cloth to cover it, so I'm going to see if that works this year. But also things like your chives. And if you go just picking those around the garden whenever you're preparing a meal, then that's a way of keeping healthy as well, because there's a lot of goodness in herbs. And the other thing that happens with the rain as well is that you start getting a lot of your favourites come up. So this is winter rocket, a little different to summer rocket, and it's wonderful raw. Yum. So there we have it, the summer roundup. I'd love to know your thoughts, if you've got any hints with those horrible Portuguese millipedes. That would be wonderful. And as well, I'd love to hear your comments and comparisons with your garden too. Do you have a problem with kangaroos and rabbits? I know blood and bone does work, but obviously I was away for a few days and hadn't put the blood and bone around. And deer, I know as well. I haven't lived where deer is a problem, and I'd just love to know what your thoughts are out there. So it's really nice sharing my garden with you all around the world. So thank you for listening and watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.